Welcome back to Texas in Focus. This is one of our road trip series. Of course, last year we're in Maine. This year we're in Kansas. And my guest is Kansas State Representative Christina Haswood. Representative Haswood, thank you so much for joining the program today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So let's start with this. You were elected to the Kansas House of Representatives in your mid-20s. If I read your bio right, we're actually the same age, 30. And you at 30, you're in the House, you're running for Senate. Me at 30, I'm hosting a podcast. So different journeys there. But tell us about your journey to elected office in Kansas.
Definitely. And podcast has always been one of the things I'd like to do as an elected official, but just haven't gotten around to it. It's a lot of work. I can tell you that much. But I was born and raised here in Lawrence and grew up here as well. And higher education journey took me from here. I started at Haskell Nations University, which is an all Native American tribal college, and then went to Arizona State University. Came back and got my master's in public health at the University of Kansas Medical Center. And by the time I came back and was about to graduate, it was 2020, and the pandemic was in full swing. So the seat became open for House District 10. The incumbent wasn't seeking re-election. So I, about a year prior, I met the first Native American state legislator in Kansas, Ponkaway Victors Cozad. She's currently retired, but I remember missing class one morning, air quotes, to go to the other direction to Topeka, and she introduced this bill called Missing More Indigenous Peoples, where it was a bill trying to educate state law enforcement on training about the issue, and I was just really taken in awe. I've been interested in politics because of health policy and my background in public health, and I feel like it always... And being a Native American Indigenous woman, my life and my academic work has all revolved around health issues. And then it seems to always go back to some type of policy or some type of wrongdoing of the government. So I was very interested in politics and got tapped to run for office. And I was 26 at the time, and it was COVID time. So I was like, I'm looking for a job anyways. And the words that my former campaign manager said was, what do you have to lose? You get to build yourself a platform. You get to talk about issues you're passionate about and the work that you've done. And by the time I filed, it was about end of April to, about the end of April. Then the primary was August. So he's like, you just have to do a sprint for 2 months. And then, if you get it, you get it. There was no general opponent. And he's like, if you do get it, then, you can do what you want to become a representative and point yourself in that position. So ended up entering in. There's 2 other candidates in the race. It was a 3-way primary. That was a really interesting experience. Working on a campaign to that capacity. That was my first time. I'm very new to politics, so I put my hat in the ring and had a lot of guidance and ended up winning with 70% of the vote. Then ran unopposed in the general, then ran unopposed for re-election in 2022, and then got asked if I want to run for state senate. And by the time I decided that, it took me about 6 months to really chew on that idea, and threw my hat in the ring for that. And that's currently what I'm running for.
And I want to get to state senate, but I want to ask you first about entering the House. So you enter when you're 26. I just wonder what that dynamic's like when you're that young. You probably have people on your staff that are the same age as you, maybe older than you. Most people on the floor are probably way older than you. What is that like? Is it uncomfortable? Is there like a bit of imposter syndrome there? What's that experience like?
That's a really great question. I think there was the youngest person when I came in was 18 years old. And then the next youngest was about 22, 21, fresh out of undergrad, I believe. And then one of my office mates, Representative Lindsey Bond, she's a few months younger than me. So there was about 4 of us under the age of 30. And it was really interesting. And we unfortunately don't have a lot of staff. So the only person that was a little bit younger than me was an intern. Oh, and then we did have a office assistant who was just finished high school as well. So um, it was interesting because you could see the generational divide. And I think what was funny is we get legislative laptops and they have a little slide on top for the camera to like hide the camera or not. And so many legislators, my colleagues were like, "Oh my God, my camera's not working." And I'm like, "You just gotta slide it to the other end." So I felt like the IT help a lot of times. And we were actually, it was really cool because the Kansas State Legislature invested a lot of technology to do um, have committee meetings be streamed. And then we actually were able to social distance in the chamber, House chamber. And all of us who were kind of new and don't have that hierarchy ranking, we were assigned up into the gallery as well. So, and we voted from our laptops, which was quite interesting. So I felt like the IT helped most of the time, but I try to use it to my advantage and to build relationships with my colleagues. I really tapped into that sense of them, having grandkids and them thinking that I'm naive. And I kind of use that to my advantage, like, oh, well, tell me about this and this and this. Oh no, I'm so new. I just don't know. And like um play that up a little bit. And then how I really connected with folks who might have a different political ideology than me is that everyone loves to brag about their grandkids. Everyone loves to brag about, what they're doing and all the accomplishments. So when I connect with folks at that just bare minimum level, I feel like we can have a really good human to human interaction. And it really helps when we get into very difficult political conversations where we can disagree at the opposite ends of spectrum. But then maybe, the next day we're like, oh, hi, like I heard you're working on this bill. Can I catch you on that? And it'd be like, yeah, absolutely. But we can see with issues as well. Another cool thing is that I'm a part of something called Future Caucus, which is like a national political group. And they have folks in Congress, and then they also have a bunch of House legislators. And I believe the requirement, air quotes again, is like 45 and younger. So they used to be called Millennial Caucus. Then Gen Z was like, hey, we're going to run for office and we're going to win. So they're like, oh, we need to rebrand. So that was awesome. And love that Gen Z is doing that. And so we have a bipartisanship future caucus in Kansas where most of us are under the age of 45. There are more Republicans and Democrats. So but you can see, a whirlwind of issues that we see as priority for our age group. Most of the folks are over 30 and do have, some have families, maybe most. So childcare is definitely a big common bipartisan topic, along with housing as well, and which are all really great topics that we need to talk about, but though might not get the bigger stage statewide with folks who are not part of our demographic who are in leadership positions.
So I'm an outsider, of course, to Kansas politics. But if I had, a stereotype like of the Kansas legislature, Kansas politics, it would probably be like, there's like some real Old Testament stuff going on there. A lot of stuff that I might look at it and be like, whoa. Would that be a correct stereotype of the Kansas legislature?
In my opinion, I look at other states, I'm like, wow, they're a little bit more crazier than we are. I feel like when I go to like these future caucus like conferences and other conferences, and I hear what's happening in their legislature. I mean, even in Missouri, there was like this weird thing of women couldn't wear tank top and like have their shoulders exposed. And I'm like, that's like, like we have people wearing like cowboy hats and like zebra hats. Like, um, so I'm like, Kansas is not that crazy. And I'm very happy about that. I feel really lucky that even though we do have folks who are, way right, way left, they kind of like do so in a very uh I wouldn't say, I don't know, respectful. Like they do their thing and they say their thing and then they introduce legislation. And then it's there. And luckily, like we are in a Republican supermajority in the House and Senate. And I feel like very seldomly, that leadership, uh, I wouldn't even call them moderate Republicans. They're a lot more conservative, but a lot of times they won't give those types of bills the time of day. Though we can't take those for granted. That, maybe they'll pull one of those crazy bills up. So I feel lucky that, we do see very weird things being proposed in legislation, but we don't really see them go through or that far in the process of things. And it gives me a sense of hope because when we talk about other topics like cannabis and marijuana, oh, we hear that everywhere in Kansas. Like folks out west, the grandmas and grandpas are excited about that. And I hear it come up in like Republican forums out west in Kansas. So I'm like, yes, let's keep this up. So it's really, cool to see how that topic can range from other demographics geographically in age range and political ideologies. So, but we also see a trend across the country of a lot of moderate Republicans being challenged by very more conservative Republicans, which is very sad because I know before I was in office, Kansas is a state that hasn't expanded Medicaid, and I think it was in 2019, it ended up passing the House, and from what I've been told, those moderate Republicans were all primaried and many were defeated. So just to see that effort with that type of issue like healthcare and other issues as well has been disheartening. And we can see that too with more recently anti-trans legislation, folks who are more moderate um, who voted to make sure that didn't go into law. They have primaries as well. So it's definitely disheartening to see that. But we hope we can, we have good candidates out there.
So you mentioned the Republican supermajority, and excuse the noise. My neighbor just decided to mow his lawn, so if you're picking up any of that, I apologize for that. But you mentioned the Republican supermajority. You of course are a Democrat, a progressive Democrat from what I read about you. Are you still able to influence bills, or is it more of an uphill battle dealing with that Republican supermajority?
That's a good question. I feel like I've been able to make some more progress in Native American Indigenous issues. So what I previously was talking about, former state legislator Victor Cozad introduced that Missouri Indigenous Peoples Bill. Um, Kansas state legislative session in 2020 was cut short because of COVID. So then her bill died. Then she took me under her wing in 2021 and asked me to pretty much lead that bill through. And we were able to get that bill through the House, through the Senate. And on the Senate, it even went to something called the consent calendar, which means it wasn't even up for debate. It was seemed as an issue or a bill that was non-controversial. And it just chills there for like 3 days. And they vote on it, and it was off to the governor's desk. And that was really cool because we had testimony and support from the attorney general at the time, who was a very conservative Republican, um, down to, like progressive folks like me. So I've also found traction with that this year where I introduced a Kansas Indian Child Welfare Act bill and ended up getting a bill hearing. And that has been like a year or two in the works. But even getting a bill hearing alone is such an uphill battle. Now my other bills like raising minimum wage or recreational cannabis, those ones are definitely not, of the priority of the legislator, and those topics probably scare a lot of folks. So I think, those ones definitely are legislation that we introduced that were like, these are our values and these where we like to see the state go. And those unfortunately have not gotten any bill hearings. And another thing through the legislative process is we can offer amendments, which are edits to bills. So sometimes we can already have that language, we can try and find areas of opportunities to offer those amendments either on the floor or in committee, and see where that takes the conversation. So, we try really hard. But sometimes you got to pick and choose your battles and focus where you want your time and energy to go to, so you don't burn yourself out.
Absolutely. So let me change the subject a little bit. I'm reading about Kansas in preparation for this interview, and one thing that might confuse folks that follow politics is that Kansas, red Kansas, has a Democratic governor. Could you explain that dynamic for us? How did that happen in red Kansas?
Oh, good question. I wasn't too tuned in when she first got elected. But what I can say, and I was in office when she got reelected, which was super awesome. I would say that Governor Laura Kelly, has done a fabulous job at trying to bring folks together, to build partnerships across the chamber and across political ideologies. And we saw that most recently with our tax plan. Now, I don't love how we just got a special session on Tuesday. I don't love how that was all um, pieced together without the whole legislative process of a committee and public hearing and all that. But from what I was able to read, it was an agreement of our tax policy from the Senate president to House leadership, Speaker of the House, as well as with her office. And, just to see that effort and to come with a tax plan, that, we're not too over the moon up, but we'll give some tax relief to Kansans, was really great because not only does that, bring everyone else together and get tax relief, but it also stops any political games to try and do something like a flat tax or to do something very disastrous, and to try and make those parties happy. I think she's done a really great job at um, putting issues that might not always get a lot of spotlight in the Democratic platform, such as rural agriculture, economy. We're really in a good state with our Kansas economy. We got something called the Golden Shovel Award. I don't really know what it is, but yay, something shiny, I guess. And we've gotten that, I think, 2 or 3 years in a row. So it's really gone to show that, the previous administration, with the Brownbacks tax plan, put our economy into a very vulnerable state. And to see Governor Kelly be like, roll up her sleeves and get to work and try to fix and try to get our state back into a more sound economic standpoint, to the point where we can, have a good surplus and a good rainy day fund. Um, all that is super cool. And I think those are issues that, as a progressive Democrat, those aren't really what I hear at the door with my constituents. But I imagine that that is what folks on the more conservative side hear more at their doors and their communities, is about the economy, and about taxes. So I think it's really great that she has taken that initiative and heard those folks and say, like, okay, let me roll my sleeves up. Let me work across the aisle and get some compromises going, so we can try and make some progress there.
So you mentioned I believe on the first answer about your state senate run. So I saw that as well, that you're running for state senate in District 2. Um, but you're actually not only running, you're challenging a longtime Democratic incumbent. So, to people that follow politics, inter-party, conflict is always pretty interesting. So what's telling you that Senate District 2 is looking for a change?
Yeah, I got asked to consider running for that position all the way back in June of last year. And kind of again getting asked to run for the House side. I was like, you sure? Like, like, why me? Like, I am like chilling in the house. I feel like I know where the restrooms are. I know, where to get some printer paper. I feel like, I'm just cooking. Like, and it's definitely, I can see how people can be in these positions for so long once you finally got your feet on the ground, and kind of know some folks and how the system works. A lot of legislation takes many years, even decades, to see the light of day. So I had all that in the back of my head, and when I got asked, it's definitely a natural position from the House to the Senate. And it is something that I have thought about here and there. I have so much respect for our current senator. She's done a fabulous job, and really represents our community values. So I had so much to consider before making a final decision, and really made that decision back in December. And I met with the current senator, and said, hey, just out of respect, I want you to know I'm going to do this. And by the time, she hasn't filed for reelection. So no one really knew if she was going to run for reelection, but I made that decision that I was going to run for the seat. And then she told me then, oh, I'm going to run for reelection. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I already made my decision. And by the time then, someone had filed for my House district already. So I was like, all right, I'm going to face a primary either way, no matter where I go. So, yeah, I really thought about it. And then as a public health person, I looked at the data of the district. So the district is 50% renters. Majority of the age demographic is of the age of 30. Most have a median income of $50,000 or less. Many are unmarried. And I just looked at the statistics and I was like, yep, that's me. Yep, check, check, check. Everything, I felt like I fit everything except I'm not Caucasian or white. So I was like, oh, okay, that's really interesting. So looking at the data on that, and then I looked at our state Senate again, and it's more conservative than the House. But also I don't see one state senator who holds my lived experiences while making and shaping our state policies. And I think that would be a very useful perspective and voice in our state Senate. And looking at those types of legislation and being in the House too. I've seen where some Native American policies, the ball was dropped in the Senate. So I feel like I could be that perspective and voice on that side, in regards to tribal policies. And just taking all that into consideration, had a good team around me and decided to file. And then I didn't file until about end of January. And definitely was off to the races. And it's been a really interesting experience. And I think the biggest barrier is I had to start from zero, campaign financial wise. And it's definitely, a little bit harder when you don't have a network of folks who have a lot of income. So it's definitely one of the biggest challenges for me. And I'm just naturally not a good fundraiser. I hate call time. So yeah.
So that is actually a perfect segue to my next question, because one thing I read about you in your bio is, like unlike some politicians, you don't come from money. And so, one thing that my friends and, listeners of this podcast know is that I am always broke. So, running for office, money and door knocking would be the two things that just completely eliminate me from running for office. So my question for you is, tell us about the challenges of running a political campaign when you don't come from money or prestige.
Yeah. So um in my area here in Lawrence, I think I'm one of the youngest, or not the youngest person running for office currently. And like I said, I came from grad school, then ran for office, so I didn't have a career history, or like a good set job, to have that network. When I see other folks like attorneys or folks who are more seasoned in age, and have that long career, they can tap into their networks from Washington, D.C. or like Austin, Texas. And my folks there are all like interns or still in like undergrad or grad school. A lot of my friends are in law school. So it's like when the first thing when you run for office and they sit you down and say, all right, we need money, candidate, you have to sit there and make a list of your personal network. And my personal network is, again, those folks who are still in school, folks who are early in their careers, or folks who are just starting a family. or maybe folks who are trying to buy a house. A lot of us have student loan debt, which has been, I feel like, such a issue that folks of not our generation don't quite understand and grasp. Um, that I like owning a house is seems like such a joke right now. When I'm just like, I don't know how I'm gonna, pay off $70,000 in student loan debt. Um, and I feel like that's definitely one of the more difficult parts is that fundraising aspect. There are really amazing organizations, C4s, who try and help candidates. Like I have been endorsed by Run for Something, and they have been such a great tool and partner through along this journey. Um, but, challenging an incumbent and being in a Democratic primary, that is also like oil and water to some organizations because they don't want to get involved in primaries. Um, and I think me and the incumbent, we share a lot of policy passions, such as the environment, such as healthcare and Medicaid expansion and reproductive rights. So there's not really, a too drastic difference if you look at us on paper, that can really be like, oh, this is why, like, she's running for office, and that's why, there's that much of a dramatic difference. So it's definitely been a challenge of, getting that help and support. Um, Not only, with these national endorsements, but locally and statewide as well.
That's so interesting because I've, as my people in my network start to run for office, I've actually, got some of those calls. And for me, it's just how do I explain to this guy or this girl that I have negative $140 in my checking account right now, so I can't make a donation. But anyway, I will close with this one. We always like to close with a softball. So I am interviewing right now because I'll be traveling to Kansas next week, spending 8 days there, mostly in Wichita, but of course I'll be mobile. What are some just have to do, must see recommendations for tourists to Kansas?
Oh, yeah. So there are this like really cool rock formation called Little Jerusalem in Western Kansas. And since you'll be in Wichita, I don't really know what kind of national or land-wise landmarks to visit out there, but they also have a Native American museum out there as well. They have a large Native American population out in Wichita. My favorite thing to do is go to round one and play the Japanese games and crane games. We don't have that in Lawrence. There's no round one in Kansas City. I would say the food too. I love going to Wichita, and there's just more of a diversity of food options there that we don't have here in Lawrence. Um, and if you find yourself with extra time, I'd say visit Topeka and the State House. I think we have one of the most gorgeous state house in the country. And you can actually do a dome tour where you can walk up in the dome, and it gets like weird Harry Potter stairs.
Mhm.
I've had to drag some of my friends because they're like scared of heights. I'm like, no, you can do it. And then there's like this little like awesome balcony, and you can see very far if it's not cloudy.
Well, pretty much when I'm in a new state, the state capital is always at the top of the list. So I will definitely be visiting there. And so with that, that is State Representative Christina Haswood, who is also a candidate for Kansas State Senate and Senate District 2. Representative Haswood, thank you so much for joining the program today.
Thank you.